So a week ago I thought the new Pokemon was another one of those obligatory remakes, like Leaf Green, or Soul Silver, fucking Hood Black or some shit. But instead of being one of those, you know that second game they sometimes make to complement the initial pair? You know, the Pokemon Emerald to the Ruby and Sapphire? Legends Arceus wasn't some reworking of Brilliant Diamond. This was something Pokemon hasn't done, like, ever. This is a complete reimagining of what the single player experience of Pokemon can be, and after like 10 generations, this isn't one new gimmick. Most of the established mechanics have had some kind of overhaul. How you explore, how battles work, how involved the trainer is. A lot of things got rethunked. So what better way to talk about the changes made to the established formula than by spoiling the whole game? First, we gotta tell God if we're a boy or a girl. He gives us a cell phone that'll never lose charge as a thanks for the conversation. Then we basically gotta get railroaded by the way of what the ancient Japanese like to call dialogue bukkake. Without turning this into another feature-length film, cause fuck that, let's get this out of the way. Arceus Legends likes to talk to you. A lot. We'll say too much. Example. Let's go over everything you have to watch and read before getting to the core gameplay. Arriving on the island and listening to this guy is around 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The next and only thing to do is to run over to your phone, which will only take about 10 seconds. However, grabbing your phone takes nearly double that time at 17 seconds. Listening to this guy tell you how to catch Pokemon will take roughly a minute and a half. From here, the only thing to do is a tutorial on catching. The quicker you make your 3 throws, the quicker it's over. Oh, and you'll be interrupted in between catches. After that tutorial, it's a little over 3 minutes to listen to this guy even more. Then we listen to him as we do the AAA game walk and talk sequence. You'll be taken off the rail about halfway into town, but the only thing to do now is to run to a nearby waypoint, which will be done in less than 10 seconds. After hitting that waypoint, it's another 3.5 minutes for the game to introduce the Galaxy Core. And by this point, I'm just trying to skip through dialogue as fast as I can, because I no longer care, because it's already been 11 minutes of cutscene. After meeting the Galaxy Core and getting released, we are technically off the rail, but the only thing to do now is to visit home and go to sleep. Nothing else to discover or do. So we're really still on the rail. It's only a few seconds to run to our house, but another full minute for a flashback cutscene, and one to tell us to go back to headquarters. It's then roughly another 3 minutes to get our mission from Stern Lady, and choose our Pokemon. We then just have to run over to this gate, which will again only take a few seconds. We then get another minute of battle being explained. Next is a Pokemon battle, but battle is in the biggest of quotation marks because the only thing your Pokemon can do is attack. And the only thing the opponent can do is attack. And because there's no way to alter the turns with styles and no way to catch the Pokemon and no choice to run away, you're basically participating in a scripted event. Because you go first, you cannot lose. This is a cutscene you play. And I really wish they allowed these introductory battles to have more going on than mindless one-move attack fest from children, especially in the game that deviated from the formula this much. So far, the Colosseum games are still the best in this regard, starting you off with mid-level Pokemon and actually allowing you to experience what a normal battle would be right off the bat. Anyway, you win, and it's another 2.5 minutes just to enter the Obsidian Fields. You finally get a real quest, but it's fully on rails. You still can't go and explore as you please, having to remain in the smallest section of the environment, and with all the interruptions in between, we're looking at roughly 6 more minutes of hand-holding. After completing the first quest, it's 30 more seconds to say, hey, let's go back to the main building, and another 40 seconds for Stern Lady to say, go home and change. Then another 3 minutes on top of that to meet the commander. After meeting the commander, it's another 30 seconds listening to this character we didn't select, another forced tutorial with crafting, and then another 3 minutes to go back out to the Obsidian Fields, where you'll finally be out in the game proper. Nearly an hour after starting the game. more if you were actually reading the schlock. Basically, we've spent roughly 32 minutes just scrolling through text and watching characters talk. Closer to 30 if you were impatient from the get-go, and closer to 40 if you were diligently reading everything at a slower pace. This is, without understating it in the slightest, the worst opening a Pokemon game has ever had. And for the game that is ripping off Breath of the Wild, the one that threw you out to the core mechanics in the span of 3 minutes, this is honestly confusing. The decision to lock your players out of the meat of the gameplay for nearly an hour because you're worried they may not understand something is just a bad decision. For people who want to make games, please do not do this. Thankfully, the insanely slow pace the story grates on the player can be spaced out by side questing, but for the people that don't really care for the optional content, or are just trying to get to the post game as fast as possible, they're going to find themselves talking to someone or other more often than not. The story and its pacing on the gameplay is easily the worst aspect about Legends Arceus. So let's fix it. We're already changing so much from the formula, so how about instead of a child, we have someone slightly older be responsible for fixing the time tragedy. Let's put them in their early 20s. Someone who already has experience being in the wild, like some random Pokemon survival expert. Instead of tossing them to a beach to be lectured by Professor So-and-so, have them land in a random part of the world, some area with lower level Pokemon. We can have the player's lack of any animal weapons be the perfect excuse to introduce the dodge mechanic. Our protagonist would wake up and say, well shit, got nothing on me. Good thing I know the low-tech way to make some of the most basic tools Pokemon trainers use. The first mission would be avoiding the local wildlife and finding some basic crafting materials. Have some of the stuff that comes from rocks and trees be on the ground in this section. They grab their stuff, get introduced to crafting, then we learn how to catch Pokemon using the environment to our advantage. After that, just have the next mission be making it to the nearest settlement, while letting the player catch what they want, battle what they want, and collect what they want. Just limit them to holding on to 6 Pokemon until the pastures are introduced in the village. Once you make it to the settlement on your own, then introduce all the Galaxy Core shit. There. This way we start off doing exactly what the game was built for, and our player isn't injecting Red Bull into their bloodstream just trying to stay awake after the 100th text box. I know it's a novel concept to just let the person play the game from the get-go in an RPG, but you know. But we're finally out and about, so we can talk about some of the game's changes. I've split this up into 4 major categories. Changes made to the battle system, the Pokemon catching changes, the exploration changes, and the map itself. Let's start with the map since it's what the main game is structured around. Initially, when I learned that the world of Legends Arceus wasn't one big continuous landscape, I was a little disappointed. Having things sectioned off into 5 separate main areas that you progress through linearly felt unnecessarily restrictive. But once I became familiar with just how good regular Pokeballs are for catching most everything, I began to understand and agree with this decision. There are 9 types of Pokeballs in 3 separate classes. The regular balls we've come to expect, a heavy set of balls which can't be thrown as far, but will catch better in stealth, and balls that will fly farther for aerial targets specifically. In normal Pokemon games, the regular ball falls off as soon as better tools are introduced. There's better versions of the default ball, the ones for when you're on water, the ones you use as soon as the battle starts or use as the battle drags on, the one for nighttime and caves, the one for specific Pokemon types, the one designed specifically to catch Kuzco's Pokeball. The standard ball is typically rendered obsolete by the time you hit your 3rd gym. Here not only does the regular everyday Pokeball not become obsolete, it's a completely viable choice throughout the entirety of the game. Baby Pokemon? Expected. Mid-level Pokemon? No problem. High-level Pokemon? What? Okay, sure. Giga Chad Thundercock? This probably won't work. Wait, okay, alright then. Out of the 9 balls you can make/buy, it's the most cost effective, both financially and resource wise. The other balls certainly do have higher catch rates, and they're nice to have on hand, especially when you want to catch something quickly in battle. But the Pokeball can easily be mass produced, it catches things from all over the map at a solid rate, and it saves your materials for when you really need them. The Pokeball being buffed to this massive Chad is one of the reasons I think these areas are split up how they are. Cause you better believe, people will farm for the Pokeball materials, mass produce it, then go catch the strongest Pokemon on the map right off the bat. The ball is busted. The in-game control for this is by inhibiting Pokemon obedience with your survey rank, the game's replacement for the badge system. There's 10 ranks total, but you only need to make it to the 7th for a complete Pokemon obedience. Really only 6 since it grants you obedience from Pokemon level 80 and below, and the highest level Pokemon you encounter are only in their 70s. You increase this rank by completing specific tasks in the Pokédex. These include repeatedly catching Pokemon, fighting them with certain moves, being attacked by certain moves, or giving them food, that sort of thing. But honestly, just catching 10 of each Pokemon as you play along will reliably raise your rank since that completes their Pokédex entry. By just playing the game normally, side quests and all, I had all Pokemon 100% obedient by the 3rd area. And with a couple of high-level Chads that were wandering through the first few sections of the game on my team, any Pokemon training to be done was pretty much over. Not necessarily a bad thing since battles aren't the main focus of the game this time around. But it is something to note since the map is split up in this way to have a semblance of a difficulty curve. It holds up more or less until you make it to this point. There are a few decently overleveled Pokemon you can find beforehand, but this is the section that grants you the travel companion who can access the highest level Pokemon in the game. From here, the story may as well just unlock the last 2 areas for you simultaneously since you're going to be overleveled regardless. It was by that point, when I had access to swimming, that I saw the dilemma a flat-out open world map possesses. If the player can theoretically catch the best monsters in the game right off the bat, then you have to account for that in the story. Essentially, everything would have to take place at level 60 through 75 because all the player would have to do is go around catching Pokemon to raise their rank high enough to command high-level Pokemon. You could essentially max out your status and party before the game even began, so sectioning you off into these isolated maps that only prevents you from just catching the best monsters, it keeps you from easily gaining rank, since there'll be a limited number of Pokemon types, and it becomes harder to accomplish new tasks for the same Pokemon over and over. They had the right idea with the map system, its purpose just falls off halfway through. Next, I'd like to look at the changes to the battle system. This is the first time in the mainline franchise that battling has taken more of a back seat to the other mechanics. You engage in them because you're doing specific tasks, your coworker is insecure because people think you're hot shit because they're trying to rob you, or because we need to decide who has the right to fight the crazy wild Pokemon themselves. It still plays a big role in Legends Arceus, but this is the first time where I would say that Pokemon battles aren't the main aspect of gameplay. Instead, I would say that just hunting and catching Pokemon have become the primary focus, with battling playing a strong supporting role to that end. Being a single-player game also means that certain moves can be tweaked and altered since they don't have to be competitively balanced. We can summarize the changes made to the battle system in terms of Pokemon viability, number of moves, how they work, how they're learned, and trainer involvement. The switch to a single-player experience is a blessing in disguise for the vast majority of Pokemon. Up until this point, a Pokemon's battle viability was based on their competitive class, and many Pokemon would have a rough go of it in PvP. If you knew you were going to play Pokemon's multiplayer, you needed to make sure you picked the right monsters for the job, because many just simply did not have the stats to compete in an open multiplayer format. Once you picked the right Pokemon, you needed to make sure that they had the right stat spread, which is where the understated mechanics of EVs, IVs, and Natures came into play. Without going too deep into that rabbit hole, having the right Pokemon simply isn't good enough for PvP. They have to be the right Pokemon with the right genetics. The same Pokemon are never truly the same, and just like real life, some are just born better than others. So you would have to make 2 Pokemon fuck for a fortnight until your perfect Pokemon specimen that would bring a tear to Adolf's eye is born. This is the best the Pokemon can possibly be, stat-wise, but then it also needs to have the right disposition in life. Those are called natures. Is it brave? Is it a wimp? A jokester? A criminal? Does he want to major in medical science or liberal arts? The nature will buff one specific stat and worsen another. So if you did the mommy daddy baby time wrong without giving one a certain item, you can end up making a genetically perfect specimen, but then the stat you needed to be good will be worse because the kid's really into turquoise or some shit, and you needed him to be a cold-blooded law student instead. And once you did that right, you would make sure that you wouldn't fight any Pokemon that were the wrong Pokemon, because killing certain Pokemon will buff a certain stat up until a certain point. And once you kill a Pokemon, the changes to that stat are permanent. So you would have to make sure that you only killed exactly 45 Digletts, 75 of that one ice cream cone, and then 140 Pidgeys, unless it's Generation 6. Then you just played soccer a bunch, or you just grow beans in Generation 7, or shove their face full of vitamins in Generation 8. They also needed to have the right passive ability, because certain Pokemon will have hobbies that are useful in fights as opposed to useless. Needless to say that training for battle was an entire process, but now you can just waltz out there and catch the Pokemon you like, give them an item for EVs, and be on your way. Because this is PvE, so there's really no wrong Pokemon choice. The one you like can pull you through the entire game. And as someone who never enjoyed the tedious process of grinding by childbirth, this is a welcome change. Legends Arceus also has done a fair bit of rebalancing with moves. We've dropped from 664 usable attacks in Sword and Shield to 180, and many of the old staples have had their power nerfed from the last iteration. Some of the weaker moves saw a buff, but on the whole, the moves you've come to understand have had their base power and number of uses toned down. Despite the moves having their base power toned down, a lot of them have actually seen some buffs due to a fundamental change in how they work. Hyper Beam, for instance, had a base power of 150, with the cost that you had to give up a turn after its use. The only time you didn't have to let your opponent attack twice was in the first generation, where killing something with the move would skip the charge. Now the move has a base power of 120, but it can be used like a normal move every turn without the need for a recharge. It's the closest the move has seen to its first generation glory days. The moves that really saw the most tweaks are the status moves. Stealth Rock, a move that only damaged Pokemon on switch-in, now damages Pokemon on a turn-by-turn basis. Rest would heal your Pokemon, but put them to sleep and out of commission unless they knew a specific move. Now it just makes them drowsy and still able to fight directly after use. Due to the change in sleep mechanics, this has inadvertently nerfed sleep moves like Hypnosis and Sleep Powder. Stat buffing moves are no longer permanent, even if the Pokemon doesn't switch out. Health draining moves restore your health by exactly the amount stolen instead of a percentage, and the freeze status is also no longer a death sentence. I'm fine with pretty much every tweak except for one, and that's the loss of spread damage moves. Arceus Legends likes to cheat in some battles and have you fight multiple opponents at once. I guess we're like too stupid to also command like 2, 3, or 4 Pokemon at once, so our one Pokemon gets to suffer while we take a Bukake from the other team. These are insanely contrived situations that just shouldn't exist, since we've established we know how to do double and triple battles. But the salt in the wound for me is that moves that used to hit all Pokemon on the other team, like Surf, Earthquake, Muddy Water, Sludge Wave, Lava Plume, Discharge, Hail, Sandstorm, Razor Leaf, Blizzard, yeah, those are all inexplicably gone, and the ones that should be hitting all the targets, like Bulldoze and Self-Destruct, just don't for some reason. At least this time Self-Destruct doesn't kill your Pokemon fully, but it's really stupid that spread moves are gone in a game where I need to fight multiple Pokemon at once. In general, the strongest moves only have 5 uses, strong moves will have 10 uses, the mid-power moves will get 20, and the weakest moves will get 40. This balances things in a way that certain attacks are best suited for those battles you need to win for the story, and others are meant for wild encounters since they can be used more often without having to head back to camp for a recharge or consume items. You can delegate certain Pokemon to fighting the wild bonds and others to fighting trainers. You can mix and match, or if you're patient enough, customize each Pokemon as you need them, because this game has drastically altered how moves are learned. Before at specific levels, you would be prompted that your little menace was trying to expand its horizons. You'd either choose to accept the new move, or keep your current set. The only way to learn an older move was usually by giving an old man some type of trinket so he would relearn your Pokemon. Essentially, you were stuck at 4 moves at all times, and the anime where Pokemon were pulling moves out of their ass made no sense at all. Now as your Pokemon levels up, They just learn moves and store them in a move bank, which you can access at any point in time. So you can have your Pokemon using weaker moves when out and about, then switch to the stronger ones as you need them. Honestly, having all the moves on deck like this is a game changer, and I hope it comes back for the next main series game. It's a harmless change to simply just let someone select the moves that their Pokemon has learned in the past. Not all moves are learned naturally, however, as you have to pay a premium fee to this kami to gain access to some of the more powerful moves. Something you'll likely reserve for Pokemon you want to keep on your team. Next is the way we can influence turn order by choosing move styles. This allows us to consume more move power points to make a move hit harder at the cost of having to sacrifice a turn, or we can hit for less damage twice over. It's a little off-putting to have the traditional turn-based combat rejiggered like this, but it's a system you can use to your advantage with a little strategizing. The only moves that get this trait are moves that the Pokemon has mastered, so to speak. You can get training for mastering moves you want to have this option quicker than normal, but styles aren't really necessary to complete the game. It's just something that adds a little more depth to the turn-based combat. Lastly, we need to talk about the trainer themselves, as this is the first time they've taken a more active role in certain battle situations. Usually they just hang back and let Jamal Dongus, the one with supernatural powers, do all the work, but this time 15-year-old us has decided to get our hands dirty. Though this is the past, so maybe they realize that fighting Pokemon by throwing bags of sand in their face isn't really a good idea. The plot is that Pokemon are getting frenzied because we broke through space and time, so we calm them down by throwing glitter in their face. It's really just an excuse to put the throwing and dodge mechanics to more use than just stalking Pokemon, and if you've ever played a Souls game, you have some idea how this goes. These mechanics aren't built for straight up combat, so they're not as fluid as Souls games, but for what it is, it's a unique way for the franchise to get the trainer more involved. A little bizarre that we're leaving it up to a 15-year-old to handle these types of situations, but gameplay wise it's functional and it tested the mechanics we've been using out and about. The catching mechanics is where this game has made the biggest overhaul. Before, the only way to catch something was to engage in battle, but now we have an entirely different take on the concept, and honestly one that's welcomed after 8 generations of stagnation. There's only 242 creatures out of the 898 on deck, probably because they didn't want to animate nearly 1,000 animals out in nature. But with nearly the same number of Pokemon in-game as the second generation's total, and getting to see them in their environment, I'd say it's a big enough number, though whether this is a solid amount or a disappointing amount is up to you. Catching Pokemon can now be done by engaging in some predatory behavior, and it helps to make the trainer feel more involved than they ever have been. For our first take on the concept, there's a lot of solidly executed ideas here, some you wouldn't expect to see until a sequel came around. All Pokemon have a certain capture rate as displayed by the arrows above their head, assuming you want to even bother getting that close. To better your chances, you can feed the Pokemon food, hide your presence with the environment, use crafted items to create cover where there is none, or catch them when they're fast asleep. The only major criticism I have here is for the self-made cover, and why Pokemon don't seem alarmed that a cloud of smoke just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. There should at least be a few Pokemon that shouldn't fall for this gag, but they're all perfectly fine with it. Apart from that criticism, I think the base catching mechanics are all balanced quite well. Natural cover starts off from being abundant to fairly scarce, giving the other catching mechanics a chance to shine. Making Pokemon only attracted to certain foods is good foresight since specific berries are easier to come by than others. This keeps lures from being overpowered, and making the very lures you'd want to use crafting material prevents you from stacking a very high amount early on. And being able to catch certain Pokemon off guard helps them feel more like real creatures. Striking a Pokemon from behind will improve your catch rate even further, as well as giving you a starting advantage in battle if you're going to go the classic method of weakening the Pokemon first. But battling Pokemon is entirely unnecessary unless you fail to sneak up on it. Sometimes you're forced into battle when you startle their habitat looking for resources, but thanks to a battle mechanic change of allowing the trainer to move around during combat, running away from these encounters has an 100% success rate. It's no longer based on the speed and level of your Pokemon. Even if you don't run away manually, choosing to run away always works, which helps keep the pace of the game. The wild Pokemon can try to attack you again immediately after, keeping the option from being too busted, and you don't have to be stuck in a battle you don't want to be in. A change that I think is definitely made for the better is having all stages of certain Pokemon's evolutionary line out and about in the world. It solves the self-imposed issue of how to acquire certain monsters without trading. Up until now, certain Pokemon cannot be evolved unless you traded them to another person. I was never really a fan of how Pokemon split up the monster library among two different games with some superficial changes. It seemed like a way to justify the trading mechanic, and honestly, Pokemon trading is the only real reason two different versions of Pokemon continue to come out. But rather than just scrap the mechanic as they went along, they stuck with games you couldn't complete on your own without luck on the wonder trading market, cheating, or friends. Like, boy, do you think I know people who play this shit in real life? They're out there investment banking for JP Morgan, not throwing apples at virtual ducks. But thankfully, we don't have to deal with the version exclusive Pokemon issue here. They tell you to catch them all, and you can do so with no strings attached to that statement. Well, you can catch everything they actually put in the game, but still. For the Pokemon that only evolve from being traded, we've gone from having to find someone in real life who would trade you, then trade you back without stealing your investment, to just finding them out in the wild, or evolving them with an in-game item like any other type of stone. It only works this way because Legends is a single-player game, but I really wish the evolve by trade method would fuck off. Honestly, if the two-game concept died off from polio, I wouldn't be wearing my morning attire for it. As old as the tradition of releasing two Pokemon games is, so is the tradition of introducing a gimmick to the Pokemon themselves. This can be a new type, using more than one in battle, giving them new evolutions, giving them new region-specific forms and special moves, or making them Godzilla. Legends' gimmick is Chad Pokemon, monsters on the larger end of the size spectrum for their kind. The Shaquille O'Neals of the species, so to speak. They're tougher to catch, they have higher stats than normal, and they'll likely disincentivize you from using the regular old Joe Schmo of that species. There really is no reason not to use the Chad version of a Pokemon, but with how deliberate their spots are on the map, I definitely thought they would only be like one-time encounters. I was kinda shocked to find they actually just keep respawning. Like, you can have a team of 6 Chad Machokes if you felt like it, which is kinda crazy. I mean, it makes sense that there wouldn't only be one Chad in existence of each Pokemon, but I certainly thought they'd be a one-time thing. You'd think that after adding and implementing brand new Pokemon catching mechanics, Game Freak would stop at hunting Pokemon down in the given environment. But they went one further by implementing an aspect of the story into how Pokemon are caught. Your character just falls into the past from the future due to a distortion in time and space. They could have just left it at that and had you catching Pokemon in ancient Japan, and no one would have really complained since the mechanics are pretty solid. But space-time distortions begin fabricating on the map at random times for fixed intervals. Some Pokemon that normally wouldn't appear in the region spawn here, and you can try and catch as many as you can before the distortion fixes itself. The more of the map that you explore, the less unique Pokemon you find, but it's still a good in-game event to put your catching skills to the test under a time constraint. The other catching events that happen are the random mass outbreaks of certain Pokemon, as indicated by an icon on the map. You can find an unordinary high concentration of certain Pokemon in specific areas, which is great if they're the ones that you haven't completed the Pokédex entries for. On the whole, I would say the new catching mechanics are a success, with the only time they struggle being on water. Sneaking up on fish Pokemon isn't the smoothest endeavor, and aiming shots in the water isn't exactly the most elegant thing in the world. You can do that thing Link does where time slows down in the air to shoot your shot, but hunting Pokemon on water is definitely a more clunky endeavor than hunting them down on foot. It's the area of the game that definitely needs more polish if these mechanics make a return. I can see why you wouldn't want to use the fishing rod since that would slow the pace of the game a significant amount, especially since you want to catch at least 10 of each type, but there's gotta be something we can do to clean this up. Maybe adding a temporary dive for stealth, or adding a water type Pokeball that skips on the surface with some slight homing ability or something like that. Lastly, I'd like to cover the game's base changes to exploration in general. A big part of every game in the past, but we're taking a very different approach here. Now I'm sure everyone and their grandmother will tell you that you're now basically playing Breath of the Wild, but with Pokemon. No more little dungeons with trainers, no battle challenges to fight, no visiting multiple towns or side events, none of that. Breath of the Wild is essentially the best descriptor to give, so rather than describe to you how that works, I'd like to go over how the formula was changed coming from there to here, because this is where I think the game has made the most controversial tweaks. There are some things I like, and some things I'm not a fan of. This will span between some major criticisms, as well as some little nitpicks. Let's start with the good. Your trainer initially starts off as a less adept version of Link. You can't climb, glide, or swim as well as him right off the bat. In fact, you never really learn to. Instead, the field skills that Pokemon traditionally implemented have transformed into useful skills for land traversal. These gradually open up pieces of the map that were formerly inaccessible, and they definitely help contribute to a sense of progression. It's a smart way to have you and the Pokemon team up to explore the world around you, and having all these skills accessed with the press of a button is also a decision I fully agree with. You transition from a child using their shovel legs to a Pokemon savant that never has to walk a day in their life, and automatically swapping these Pokemon for you based on terrain is great foresight on the developer's part. The Pokepal that doesn't get the same shine as the others is definitely the bear. It's a slower version of the reindeer and it's only used to find some poems and people. You won't really be using him unless you're a completionist. Besides that, you've got a Pokemon replacing Link's horse, one replacing the Zora armor, one replacing the glider, and one replacing his climb. None of these are restricted by stamina or sprint meters, and they greatly speed up your exploration of the map. These allow you to gather materials more efficiently, which is important since crafting is a big part of the game. They wisely allow you to craft anything from anywhere on the map, and the material balancing is surprisingly effective at keeping you from being stacked without some serious grinding. The issue of Link just being able to carry everything he finds without limit has also been addressed by splitting your inventory between a limited space you have on your person and the infinite space of the item chest. If you want more space, you have to buy it from this man in HQ. Only the game treats it as you not buying a bigger bag, but just learning how to pack things in the bag you have more effectively. It's just an amusing framing device for item expansion. The game's side quests will occasionally give you access to some things of interest like shiny Pokemon and special evolution items, and they often help you grind towards your next rank as well as doubling as a way for you to progress the main story. All quests are tied to the single town, and this is something I'd like to see expanded upon with a more traditional map in the sense that you'll have more than one town to visit. The town on offer is at least structured conveniently with all shops being located on the same strip and your house being separate from the rest of the locals to keep it closer to the main gate. On the more subjective end of my likes are the Pokemon pastures in town displaying your most recent catches, and the game's atmosphere during the story's final segment when the sky is literally in shambles. It's handled in that Majora's Mask final 6 hours kind of way, in that all the music has been replaced with an ominous theme, and it only changes to a faster paced mix for battles. But now we get to the negatives. Probably my biggest issue with exploration is the lack of control options. Even after 20 plus hours in that motherfucker, it never felt natural to access the side quest menu or map. See, Legends doesn't require waypoints for certain things like satchels, so I would occasionally need to keep opening the map to check for their location. But the button to open the map isn't the same button to close the map, so I would often open the map, then zoom out instead of close it. If the map is tied to the minus button, then I would always have the minus close and open the map, and then just have ZL and ZR solely control the zoom. Instead, minus opens the map and also doubles as a zoom out button, along with ZL. Weirdly, ZR zooms in the map, but the plus button does not. It's such a bizarre choice and one you'll probably fight with over the course of the game. The button to pause the game and access your items, saves, and settings is on the D-pad instead of the plus or minus buttons, so that piece of muscle memory may need some relearning as well. The weird choice here is that side quests aren't accessed from this end of the UI, instead you need to go into the map and hit Y. I would literally just have the minus button be the map, and then the plus button access the pause menu like literally every other game. I would include the Pokédex and side quest menus to the pause menu UI, freeing up another button. Then have up on the D-pad change between Pokemon and Pokeballs, and use the X button to mount the Pokemon. That's my solution to keep the controls as they are now, but with how clunky it is to swap between Pokemon while traveling, I would try my best to have all the rideable creatures directly tied to the D-pad. I'd have up before the bird, down before the horse, left before the rock climb, and right before the bear. Then just have the fish automatically activate whenever the player enters the swimming state, and allow them to deactivate the fish with any tap of the D-pad while in the air. If they don't tap the D-pad when transitioning from sea to land, then just have them automatically swap from the fish to the horse like normal. This eliminates the need of the current function of left and right on the D-pad, which is swapping between mountable Pokemon, and moving the satchel and Pokédex to the pause menu with free D-pad up and D-pad down. This would make swapping between Pokemon far more fluid than the clunky cycling, and make the menu UI make more intuitive sense. With that setup, you could also leave X as its current function as well. My next gripes concern the actual act of material grinding, most of which is done with Pokemon unless the item is just lying out and about. Being able to throw out multiple Pokemon to farm several things at once is a good inclusion, and the process in and of itself isn't the problem. It's not being able to use the Pokemon on the horse when you can do so on the fish. It just makes things unnecessarily clunky. Maybe this is just a way to attempt to keep your movement from being overpowered, but the process of riding in, despawning the horse, throwing the Pokemon to farm the object, then respawning the horse, isn't long enough to make nearby wild Pokemon a threat. It's just long enough to make the farming process kind of annoying. If I don't want to fight, I'm gonna escape with no problem, so you may as well just let me use the Pokeball while on the horse, or in the basket. If you were really worried that the player would just ride everywhere trying to catch Pokemon, you could arbitrarily make it so that you couldn't throw empty Pokeballs on the horse, but then allow the player to throw their Pokemon out to battle, or at least throw them out to farm. Another UI issue comes from the Pokemon pasture and its lack of ability to sort Pokemon in any way, shape, or form. The weird thing is that the material UI has a quick sort function that makes everything easy to find, but for whatever reason, you have no ability whatsoever to automatically sort your Pokemon, despite the two UIs being so similar. Not alphabetically, not with their Pokédex number, not by evolutionary lines, nothing. In a game where I'm potentially going to be catching 25 Pidgeys, the least you could do is have some quick sorting system so it'd be easy to choose what to release back to the wild later on. They knew you'd want to do something like this since there's a mass release function, but the missing piece here is the lack of sorting. The last of my gripes are closer to the nitpick end of the spectrum. First is how context-sensitive Pokemon actions overlap with material collecting. See, picking up items and using Pokemon in a specific context share the same button, and once you get the rock climbing monster, you can sometimes end up in his basket rather than picking up the item you were trying to grab. This only happens in enclosed spaces with items out in the open, so it doesn't really happen too much, and the issue never occurs until after he joins your team 3/4 of the way into the game. Next is how Legends handles its music. There's a really nice soundtrack here that's pleasant to listen to, but a lot of the time you'll find it being drowned out with musical cues that enemy Pokemon are nearby. It's that thing Zelda does when certain music plays because you're about to get mugged, but it takes up a big majority of the music space since a lot of the time you're just trying to catch Pokemon. It's just a shame that most of the work these three composers did gets constantly flushed out by this track because we were standing near a Spearow trying to collect rent. It sucks that I gotta pay for my haircut without getting to see the options first, and this fucking Cherrim side quest was so awful they literally had to patch that shit. Seriously, it shouldn't be this tedious to find a Pokemon by the 17th side quest. I'll end this video by making a few more suggestions for the sequel installment, given these mechanics ever get to see the light of day again. First is creating some kind of favorites list for your quick select tool belt. Currently, the list can become bloated with Pokeballs, lures, and other field items, and just being able to limit that selection in some kind of way would be helpful. A function to place waypoints on satchels and other in-game areas would be cool and eliminate a lot of the map checking. Initiating the special events shortly after you arrive would be a nice convenience to eliminate a lot of the waiting. Having certain Pokemon opt to fight their natural predator alongside you, instead of always having all wild Pokemon team up against you, would be a great touch to help them feel more like real creatures. This would also put more pressure on you to catch your target quicker since the other wild Pokemon is just trying to kill him. Lastly, some way to use a Pokemon's healing move out of battle would be a welcomed inclusion. I get there's potions and everything, but we can already summon Pokemon out to interact with them, and it would give us a creative way to save our resources for the Pokemon who can't heal themselves. I'm sure there's more creative ideas this format can lend itself to, and hopefully these mechanics don't fade into obscurity for the next mainline Pokemon games. Following the success of Arceus, if people hear that the next games use the same mechanics, it'll get more folks excited about Pokemon Radiant Vermilion, Lustful Fibgrau, Citrine and Topaz, Big and Small, Low and High Credit Score, Drunk and Sober, Go and Away.